Hello, everyone. It seems that we can start. My name is Hana Sirovica, and I will be the moderator for the evening. It is my pleasure and joy to welcome you to the conversation titled Reparative Explorations, The Pursuit of Joy. This is the first public event of the Repair program, which is started by Kurziv from Croatia, which is my organization, Krytyka Polityczna from Poland, and Maska from Slovenia. And the program is devoted to exploration of the potentials of culture to work reparatively in regards to the present political, social, and ecological crisis. Firstly, I would like to define some important terms explaining on what we mean by repair and reparatively. Our view on that word or term is inspired by the notion of reparative critique, which was introduced by cultural theorist Eve Kosovsky-Sedgwick in her very influential essay, Paranoid Reading and Reparative Reading, or You're So Paranoid, You Probably Think This Essay Is About You. So as you can see in the title that I just spelled out, Kosovsky-Sedgwick defines reparative in regards to research and culture, and in contrast to the paranoid approach. Paranoid approach is viewed as anticipatory and filled with negative affect, and can be described as looking at the object of study from a distance, or as an approach directed as seeing through something. In contrast, the reparative approach engages a more empathetic view. It is in closer relation to its object or topic, and it is trying to think or react together with the object or topic instead of analyzing it from a distance. Enabling, according to her, more playful, nurturing, and supportive responses, and also more open to the unexpected outcomes. So following this view tonight, we decided to follow Eve Kosovsky-Sedgwick link between reparative approach and seeking of pleasure and producing joyfulness. So for her, reparative process is fueled by pursuit of joy and pleasure. And just to stay with the term joy for one more second. So it is a feeling that is often seen as devoid of political agency, and is more often linked to apolitical or anti-political strands of consumerism or escapism, instead of something that is that can be that can act politically. So tonight we will try to look the other way at potentials of joy as a survival strategy, but also as a way of generating resistance. And to be more concrete, we look at joy as a potential response to political depression and ecological grief. Those are the two terms describing public feelings or structures of feeling linked with the current political climate, as well as climate change. Not just political. They are related to feelings of hopelessness, sadness, anxiety, and similar, which occur due to distressing political events or in reaction to general direction our society and planet are heading into. So after this brief sketch of topography of terms that will serve as starting point for tonight's conversation, I will very briefly introduce our speakers for the evening. So tonight with us is Klara Otorepec, who is a radio journalist and editor, publicist and communication manager from Slovenia. She is also a trained social pedagogue. She has been active in different groups, dealing with current global issues such as precarization, globalization, economic sustainability, women's rights, and migrations. Then we also have Una Bauer, who is a theater scholar, professor, and writer based in Croatia. Her research interests have recently been focused on affects and emotions, sorrow, mourning, and death in the context of performing arts. And from Poland, Ola Knychalska, who is a project coordinator, curator, and researcher. They have extensive knowledge and experience in queer feminist and anti-fascist artistic and activist organizing, experimental pedagogies, and climate-oriented cultural and educational projects. As for myself, I'm Hana Sirovica, writer, editor, researcher, and generally a cultural worker from Zagreb. So all of the speakers this evening are also part of research teams that are just starting to develop their reparative responses to different aspects of crisis surrounding us today. I hope that tonight we will hear more on some of the possible pathways. And before actually starting and inviting the speakers to take over, I also have to state that this conversation is a part of a project called Testing Ground, which is co-funded by the European Union. Okay, I would like to start with the first round of questions now, so addressed to everyone. You are all practitioners and thinkers active on various fronts of trying to act politically through culture. In planning tonight's talk, as I explained, we decided to make a link between two structures of feeling that seem quite symptomatic for the times that we find ourselves in, namely political depression and ecological grief. So we try to make the link between them and the pursuit of joy as a possible remedial strategy or response to the issues that are underlined in those structures of feeling. So I would ask maybe Ola first, but then also then Klara and Una to present parts of either of your own practices or practices that you study or are in touch with, that you feel can be linked to the terms and structures of feelings I just mentioned. And also, how would you describe the importance of joyfulness in your work? Ola.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello to everyone. Well, I think that I am the one who is has a more practical background here, and that's why I will maybe try to first introduce one of the activity that I think that would be relevant because I am the co-founder and of the queer feminist collective, which is based in Warsaw, and it operates in the field of culture, but we try to blur boundaries between art, curating, education, activism, clubbing, and community making. And I mean, we test and collect all methods and modes of working or and doing things from different fields of activity, like radical pedagogy, activism, experimental art. So and the question of joy and pleasure is very essential for our activities, actually, because as the queer collective, we are of course very inspired by, on the one hand, by queer theory, where pleasure is seen as a side of resistance and the way to challenge the dominant norms and powers structures, and this relationship between pleasure and power, where pleasure and joy, where a pleasure and joy are can be political acts of resistance that challenge the oppressive structure. It's it's exploring by amazing theories such as Sarah Ahmed, you mentioned about F. Kosowski-Sedgwick, Judith Butler, Audre Lorde, and they are totally icons for us. But in practice, we for us in practice, queer pleasure and a femme pleasure is somehow essential it is like a kind of central, like a figure structure of feeling, and we try to introduce it or celebrate or cultivate it with things we are doing. And one of the like very important project I would like to introduce you here in this in case of this topic is like a CAM school, which is an actually intersectional educational program that explore like collaborative modes of working and learning together through performance, action, through experiments, and queer feminist methodologies. And this long-term project, which is a lot about self-organization, it's like explore a lot of possibilities for finding joy in learning and sharing knowledge together. Like it is like a kind of very important, like very important, like for us when we just preparing the syllabus, like how we can just like how we just incorporate pleasure and joy in the learning process, and how like what kind of like what kind of methods we can use to just like to just create the learning process like as a like something which gives pleasure, which can just be like which can be something some very different experience than people usually have from like educational experience, like or very often they have this kind of experience. And like this is we are like on one way we incorporate this by organizing time together and adjusting the rhythm of work to people's needs, specific people's needs. We also organize like trips, learn how to give constructive feedback. It's super important, and receive it without causing harm. And we play together, check in with each other's feeling. We are open to like accommodating different kind of mental and physical conditions. And this is like everything we just learned through like methodologies that we take not only from like from activists, from radical pedagogies, from different like from methods that like are like explored usually in the field of like informal like activities. And but I also want to mention very briefly about like, and this is like this yes, and I also want to briefly also about the second like activity we really like dedicated also here in Warsaw. It is like Dragana. It's a club night which hosts like a new phenomena in dance music, sound-based art, and like and smaller scale performances. And like Dragana explores the potential of club culture as a like a site of queer pleasure and like a possible collective resistance that is very much explored theoretically by Mackenzie Varg, for instance. And like this thinking about rave space where like people, individuals can come together, experience joy, pleasure, and it is also have very like a lot of liberation like factors, and it's like losing you know, this like this parties we are organizing, there are like we are trying to maintain like a safer space for people, for queer community, because this is like our like we address this to queer community here in Warsaw. And like letting like and creating the space where like people can like lose themselves in time, taking substances, having sex, dancing and experiencing like totally different mode of productivity, which is totally like in opposite of like neoliberal modes of productivities. And like this is like two like formats we work as with CAM right now, but they're totally intertwined, because it's not like that educational process is totally separate of like nightlife, because it totally like intertwined and inspired each others. And also like yeah, and I think that like heart of it, center of it is somehow like how to try to really like reach this how to just cultivate pleasure as an act of resistance and liberation for like people who's like I mean, for communities who has to just slip out of normative oppressive structure. And yes, and this is like I just maybe wanted to start with this introduction of product. And but maybe I also add that like we also use this expression friendship infrastructure or infrastructure of care, which is like also very important for us as a model of our work as a collective, because we are now 5 years old, and we have been constantly transforming throughout this time. And that I think that more and more we are now thinking about like about like our activity, not only what we like provide, what we produce, but how we do this. And I think that it is also super important in case of this topic, because like a chemist is just a group of people which also like us, and more people circulate around, and it is very about like doing things together for like some community, but also like how to take care of each other in this like a group, and how to work in these precarious conditions, because we are still working in culture, and how to learn to work, and like with like this in this very specific like conditions with very vulnerable people around, and how to not hurt, and how to like take care of each others. And this is like super important, because I think that it is not possible to create the conditions for pleasure and joy, not participating it in somehow, like so how to celebrate the facts. I mean, I don't want to just say that that like I have to love my work. It is kind of neoliberal kind of, but more like how to learn to just really join this pleasure when we are like maintaining it and doing it together. And yeah, something like this. I will stop here maybe. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Ola, for such a nice introduction, and also for shedding light on the collective potentials of joy and pleasure. Klara, maybe you can take the screen now.
Yes, thank you. Hello also in my name for inviting me to this discussion. I think I'm gonna be somewhere between practice and theory, maybe. So at least I hope I will be, because when I was reading this questions, or at least these points of discussion for today, I had several different thoughts, and hopefully I'll be able to articulate them properly. Basically, my let's say my main point would be that, as you mentioned, Hana, this current state of affairs, the political depression and ecological grief, I think it really comes from the lack of let's say, this grand political narrative for a long-term motivation for a change, because if we have like this grand narrative, it kind of predicts a longer development of future for presumably better situations. And I think we're lacking this at the moment. And this is also strongly lacking, strongly connected with the ability to imagine our own future as a society and work towards it. And in order to do so, and if we really want to do this, I've noticed that there is also no serious attempt to actively work towards producing positive emotions and feelings that would connect us to the social change, or at least positive emotions that would help us realize this future that we want for ourselves. And here, I think the concept of joy and joyfulness as a political tool is very, very important. But on the other hand, I'm also noticing that there is really no, let's say, serious work done on emotions and feelings, because they're considered as something that is purely a question of private lives or private emotions, not a social question. I mean, maybe to some extent, yes, but generally it's not really seen as a serious political question, which is kind of odd, because from the history and the past big changes in society, we know that if you want a revolution, you need to feel passionate about it, and you need to, you know, awake something in people in order to feel excited about their own future and the social changes. And at first, when I was thinking how my work, which seems very basic and simple, because I'm just a coordinator of a reading feminist seminar, really comes into this whole question of joyfulness and social change, because as I thought, okay, we're just gathering together with different women each month, we read the feminist text, and then we discuss it. That's how my work looks, really basically from the outside point of view. And when it was mentioned that maybe this could be like a form of repair or a practice or like possible strategy or response to what you, Hana, already said surrounds us, and I also tried to elaborate a bit more now. And I was thinking, okay, how does this really go well together, or is this really the response to the situation? I remembered two occasions that happened in the reading seminar, and that kind of answered this question. First occasion was not exactly happening in the reading seminar, but I was discussing with some other groups and my radio co-workers at the feminist radio show about feminist self-care. That was one of the topics of the previous editions. And what are the forms of feminist self-care? And that's when I immediately thought of this group, because I realized at that moment that this is a place of comfort, of feeling safe, of feeling positive emotions, even if the topics that we are discussing are difficult and hard and not pleasant at all. And it also made me realize that when we're reading these texts and discussing them, that gives meaning to my own experience, and also gives meaning to the experience of other women that are also present at the moment. And because we are sharing those emotions, that makes us feel not alone, despite the political situation that is happening around us, and it seems to be worsening every day. But it also, brings us some sort of happiness, even though, as I said, the topics are not happy at all. So that was the first clue that maybe this could be, even if it seems really, really basic, could be a form of like a repair and a form of practice that can help us, that can be a helpful political tool. And the second was that we were in the reading group as part of this project, reading selected works from Alexandra Kollontai, which I'm not sure if the whole audience is familiar with her, so I'm just gonna briefly describe her. She was a Soviet feminist, politician, revolutionary, as well as the first woman in history to become an official member of the governing cabinet. So that was right after the Russian Revolution. And especially her text about love and how love and the way that we as society feel love or see it, and how our relationships are formed is a very important question and should be taken very seriously if we ever want to make all these revolutionary changes to last. And because the way people feel, the way their emotions are formed towards each other, but also towards the ideas, are very important in the long run, because, you know, the mere rough review of how love used to look like in the past historical periods and how it changed through the history shows that this is a very flexible emotion, but also a very powerful one that determines how political structures are preserved in a way, like, or how it protects the capital from being dispersed, if we like look at the love in bourgeois kind of concept. And she really points out that if there has to be a high potential of love in society, if we want to make the changes happen, because we need to have like a very common ability in our society to empathize with others. And this is also one of the tags that really spark a lot of debate in our reading seminar, because we realize that yes, nobody is concerned with the question how to awaken those emotions in people, like how to trigger that pleasant excitement in people when they think or at least hope their actions will change the world for the better, how to ignite those heartfelt desires for the right thing. So it's not difficult to sacrifice your own energy or time for something that you believe in, because anger and despair that can also accompany social changes and have had in the past, in the long run are two, let's say, toxic emotions to motivate us to actively participate in transforming the world. And compared to love or joy or more positive emotions, their potential is very short-lived and so intense that after they decline, we just feel exhausted, not inspired for new struggles. So in that sense, we were discussing, like, why is it there not more focus on that? Why is this not a serious social question that should be discussed or worked upon? Because, yeah, nobody seems to be taking emotions, especially happy ones, seriously, even as a research question, because in this reading group that we have, there are women from different areas of expertise. Some of them also come from biology and cognitive sciences. And even though there is some understanding about how this is like an important motivator for change, not only on individual level, but on a societal one, there is a staggering lack of like research or serious research done on these questions. And we all agreed that we were active in other groups before that were not just focused on reading, but also like more, let's say, direct political work, such as like protests or like other types of political action. The main reason that kept us going was that we felt joy for, let's say, revolution. If I'm being very basic, but I think I should be in this point. And we felt joy in doing what we felt is right, or at least make things better. And it was important for us that we always had that group that we come back later, that even though if we felt desperate at some point, the community helped us to keep on going, to keep on sparking joy for social change. which is what we are now doing in this reading group. At this point, we're just focusing on like positive emotions in a way that help us go from day to day, we're not planning a revolution yet. But with reading this text from Kollontai and discussing what we as a group feel about our group or about other groups, or why are we not excited about changing some things, we realized that there is no active political work being done at the moment, or at least very, very little has been done that would really spark positive emotions for social changes. And in this way, let's say, like joyfulness as a concept is something that I can imagine that a lot of people are not taking seriously as a political tool, but considering what we discussed in our group, and also if you're more like inclined to read academic texts and you trust Marxist theoreticians such as Alexandra Kollontai, apparently positive feelings are an important political action, political tool, and should be taken seriously. But I have to say that this was not apparent to us for a long time, and it just became like we just kind of became aware of it lately in our group. So joyfulness as a political tool is something that, now that we are aware of this, will be something that we will develop even further. So I'm excited to see where this will bring us at the end of this project. And I think I'll stop here now and discuss maybe further on later with the other questions.
Great, Klara, thank you very much. So Una, I actually introduced you as a researcher whose recent interests are sorrow and mourning and similar affects, but also you did publish a book that was titled On Theater and Other Joys. So I think maybe you can shed light on like a broad spectrum of affects. But yeah, maybe let's just stick with the first question on the joy in your practice.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ola and Klara. I could definitely relate to everything that you were saying, and Klara's introduction is something that I could copy or repeat myself as well, in terms of, the disappearance of grand narratives of political change and, any kind of utopia. We really have no language for utopia at the moment, and it seems like that kind of idea has completely gone off the radar or became uninteresting. And to go back slightly to this idea of reparative critique and Eve Kosowski-Sedgwick and what she termed as paranoid approach in terms of what are the kind of consequences of insisting on distance and criticality of analysis, and the attempts at being a radical critical thinker. And I'm going to tell you a little anecdote that I experienced when I was unsuccessfully learning how to drive, because my driving instructor on one of our sessions, he said, of course, you know that Earth is flat, right? And I was just kind of slightly confused, but I was actually quite interested in that conversation, because I've never met anybody before who actually believes that Earth is flat. But the way that he was arguing was, why do you believe what they taught you in school? You're not being critical at all. Like, you're just being naive in terms of understanding what's going on. So this kind of, the way that he was using the word critical, the way that he was interpreting critical thinking as, not falling for the idea that Earth is round, was somehow indicative of, I think, that what's happening as a global kind of crisis or whatever, global sort of structure of feeling, has something to do with the fact that it seems like different kinds of conspiracy theories have actually hijacked, you know, the very idea of critical thinking and of kind of problematizing different experiences. And I think in some ways that level of, you know, that level of paranoia of always attempting to be suspicious of ideas, of thoughts, of feelings. You know, my sense is that dominant structure of feeling at the moment is kind of, and this has actually been going on for a very long time, is kind of that we are trapped in a culture of irony, of satire, of grotesque, that kind of, and feelings of, you know, feelings of not feeling, or, you know, kind of providing some sort of excuse, or, you know, keeping our distance, or trying, you know, to look smart or whatever. This has still sort of dominates our world. And actually a lot of the, and this is, I mean, you know, this sounds very general, but what I'm talking about is a lot of sort of current cultural production in the field of theatre, for instance, in Croatia. And that sense of not being able to actually let go in a sense, and, you know, be embarrassed, be embarrassing, be stupid, be kind of over dramatic, you know, be sentimental. It seems like there is a lot of you know, people being on guard, and, you know, and theatre production being very on guard. You know, whenever you open up a certain feeling, there always has to be this moment of distance where you say, well, actually, I didn't really mean it like that, or, you know, this was actually a satirical, you know, take on something. So this kind of lack of, I don't know, of immediacy, or of this kind of silliness, or kind of you know, feelings are, they're a bit sad, and they're a bit like, I mean, when I say feelings are sad, I mean like they're a bit pathetic, and we are kind of looking a bit sad when we are like deeply engaged in emotions. You know, it's like it's hard to take that seriously somehow. And I think actually in relation to that, and I was trying to think what would be those reparative practices, or what would be those reparative processes that would kind of make, you know, feelings not so distant, or, you know, us not having the need to guard ourselves from the intensity of whatever, you know, whatever feeling there are. And I was kind of thinking of a couple of art projects actually, and one of them is a project that was done by Miljana Babic and Ida Hansen. And it was actually a project that started as a part of Corners project, which was kind of like a collaboration of various artists from sort of corners of Europe. So from up north and, you know, south, and like non, you know, kind of marginal countries, you know, northern countries, and then Balkan countries, and so and so. So different artists were put together in different combinations. And Ida and Miljana met during that project, and they decided to start this artistic project, which was called Put Yourself in My Place. And it's, you know, the premise is very simple. So for a certain amount of time, I think it was about a month, they basically exchanged their lives. So Ida went to live at Miljana's house, and Miljana's flat, and Miljana went to live at Ida's flat. They were not meant to reproduce each other, or to pretend, you know, to act each other. They were meant to be themselves, but in another's life, you know, in another person's life. And, you know, to hang out with their friends, to go to work, you know, to kind of do all that stuff that this person was doing. So those kinds of practices, for instance, you know, that's kind of practicing or kind of living another person's life as a way of accessing certain emotions, or certain kind of ways of living, or certain, you know, to have this access to a different affective structure of a certain community. and that belongs actually, and that's not just like a touristic kind of thing, but that actually there is a structure to that, you know, which is kind of, and it doesn't really matter whether we call it like, you know, everyday social art practices, or whether, you know, whether we insist on this being art, or whether we just say, well, whatever it is, it's like, you know, kind of experiment, you know, life experiment or whatever, something like that, or life challenge, or, you know, whereas challenge is a weird word, but that kind of thing. I started thinking, you know, how interesting it is to try to kind of bring some sort of effective estrangement within the context of our lives, you know. So that's like, for instance, one example of this kind of exchange of life. Or for instance, Siniša Labrović had a project in 2030 which was called The Job, and basically WHW opened a kind of call for proposals for people to work in a gallery for a certain amount of money. It was only like 2 weeks. So basically he did a series of interviews with, you know, there were like 200 applicants for this job. And he did a series of interviews to understand why is it that they would like to just work in a gallery, just sit in a gallery as a guard of the gallery. And, you know, through those conversations and those kind of interviews with these people, and through certain kinds of connections that he established at that time, and also at the end, you know, the job was, you know, somebody won that job, or he was working in a gallery for a certain amount of time. And this was also framed as a kind of, you know, artistic project within this. But it was also just this space of actually, you know, going through those interviews, which were actually really, you know, kind of working as a sort of critique of the whole kind of competitive interview structure of, you know, capitalist society that we live in, you know, where you kind of have to show yourself in the best possible way. This was kind of working in a kind of opposite direction, and yet, you know, engaging people in some ways. So I was thinking somewhere along those traces of those two projects, I was thinking of within this project that we are doing with Kulturpunkt, actually kind of initiating a series of those kind of everyday social art practices. So, for instance, and it would be quite interesting, I mean, you know, we still have to see like what the possibilities of this is, but either like to kind of write an open call for proposals or something like that, where we would sort of work on different kinds of interventions into each other's lives. So for instance, either that sense of, for instance, you could go to work with another person, you know, and then that person would go to work with you for a day or a week or something, or would kind of, you know, sort of have, you know, has to find themselves within the context of your other job, or try to do it. And obviously sometimes it's more easy, like I probably wouldn't have a lot of problems with exchanging my position with Hana's, or Hana coming to teach at the academy or whatever, something like that. But probably with some other people it would be a bit more demanding, you know, like if somebody was a psychiatrist, and then how would you actually, you know, do that, whether you would be allowed. But like looking into what the possibilities are, you know, to kind of experience as a very serious task, you know, someone's internal structure of their lives, and the kind of emotions that they're encountering. Now, before I continue with this, what other kinds of ideas that I had, I was just thinking about joy. And I do, like, I'm a bit wary of the kind of forceful joy or something like that. I'm kind of more comfortable with, like, you know, allowing the spectrum of emotions to come out as a sort of, you know, as a sort of a strategy of approach. And then joy will necessarily, I think, somehow find its way, you know. So I think it's kind of hard to say, okay, well, you know, let's focus on the orgasmic experience of every second of that day, because that's probably not going to happen. But just to be able to be somehow alive within the, you know, like concentrated on being alive in a certain moment, because I think that's actually what could provide that. One of the activities that could be part of that everyday social art practices that we could do would also be, like, you know, following a person if they have a really very stressful task to perform, or something that, like going to a doctor or going to so to organize a kind of a social structure that would then facilitate that as a kind of a set task that needs to be done. So obviously, and I know this might sound a bit strange, because like if you are going to a doctor, you probably want your partner to come with you, or your best friend or something like this. But I think there is a lot of opportunity for those situations to be perhaps to invite people that you're not that close or that intimate with into that space, and to share those moments with them. Obviously, there has to be certain preparations for that kind of work, and it does require some sort of emotional labor or stuff like that. So that would be thing, or that kind of that what I mentioned, this sort of eating what another person is eating. So like connecting through that, like making kind of a recipe for what another person will eat tomorrow, and then like taking their recipe for you as well, and then like because I think part of the problem of this kind of accidental life that we're living is like how what am I going to eat today? Oh, I could Google it, and then you Google somebody's recipes and you don't really care. But if there is a network of these things organized where you can actually kind of take part in that, and where that actually the recipe that you're eating is a recipe that's a part of somebody's life, and that there is actually an exchange that's happening in that place, and then you can discuss how this food is affecting you, or how how that meal was for you, or like making sure that, because if you want to recommend a recipe to someone, you should actually know what his tastes and preferences are before you can actually suggest what is it that because otherwise they will be suffering. So that kind of slight non-invasive getting to know someone and like connecting with them, or for instance getting directions on what to do the next day from a person, or where to go, or how to. So this, like what I was thinking of, this kind of producing joy was this kind of like, I'm imagining a kind of a social structure which would be partly directed, obviously, like a dramaturgical kind of organization of our mutual lives, and that would exist in a kind of given framework, like, okay, we're doing this for 2 months or 3 months or whatever, and we gather 20 people who are willing to do that. And the idea would be that kind of mutual organized sedimentation of different kinds of feelings within which we would reconstruct within our lives. So yeah, that's some of the ideas that I was having on future stuff, and I'm aware of the time, so I think I'm going to stop now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Hana. Thank you everyone for actually shedding that much light on the potential of small scale social situations, which are just like Klara explained on how emotions are not seen as politically fruitful, especially as potentially fruitful source of political actions, especially the positive emotions. I think that same could be said for small scale social situations, which are also quite often overlooked in the grand narratives we often employ to describe politics or political processes, social processes. And thank you, Hana, for going into that much detail with some of the potential practices that kind of override the situation of a close-knit community participating in something, and what you suggested sounded like kind of a networking model that that can really produce some quite unexpected situations. So for the next question, I will ask you to be brief, all of you, because we don't have much time left. So we've heard a lot actually from Hana, especially about some potential methods that could be used. As methods of knowledge exchange, but also like when I'm talking about knowledge, I'm talking about a specific kind of embodied or situated knowledge. So I would actually like to hear more. Of course, you, Ola and Klara, also explained a bit or in more depth, but I would like to expand a bit more, because all three of you are pedagogues in different ways. And all of your work involves experimented with different methodologies of knowledge production and transfer. So if you could just briefly maybe put us through some of the connections between experimenting and joy seeking in your pedagogical practices, and in general, how do you feel about the role of pleasure in forming knowledge and knowledge production and knowledge transfer from your practical points of view?
Yes. Well, again, what I've learned in this, by being the coordinator of this reading group, and also before that, just a simple participant, if I can say that, is that, of course, as silly and also as obvious that may sound, we need to feel joy when we're pursuing knowledge, and that really does not come naturally, as one might think. Because also as Una's example on the driver instructor who asked her if she's not doubting what she has learned in school, we all know that the process of gaining knowledge isn't instantly pleasant and often is quite unpleasant, because especially when we're still part of like academical system or let's say educational system, sorry, that is a better term, because it includes all the levels of education that we experience throughout our life. Sometimes, or like often, we later on in life need to learn how to feel joy when we're seeking knowledge, and then share it, or we need to learn and experience how we can form knowledge that brings us joy. And it's definitely easier in groups or collectives where there is always someone that can help you spark joy if the spirits are low, or helps you inspire or see meaning in the knowledge that we are forming. Especially also in the past, that was my experience in other reading groups where I try to learn more about things, and those groups were mainly composed of men who were already excited about gaining knowledge, and me as a woman, I often felt like that I have to work really, really hard to feel passionate about the knowledge that was produced in those circles, because it seemed like that I have to be very serious about it, and I have to feel serious when I'm studying or reading. And even though if I felt excited, it was kind of considered that this is only like a cute side emotion, but because knowledge is something serious. So yeah, but also what Una mentioned before, that we often feel cynical towards positive emotions, even if they're, no matter the context. Also, I had to kind of check myself, because I also had a similar approach or similar attitude before when it comes to feeling joy, and then also even considering it as a political tool or something that has to be a political question, not just a question of individual emotions. But that took me a really long time, and I only realized that in this reading seminar, through reading literature, through forming new, let's say, radical feminist changing knowledge, or like knowledge for social change, and being in an environment that allowed me to really express what I think about the knowledge that we were reading, and also say, well, I don't agree with that, or like, I think this is bullshit, quite frankly. And to experience all that brought me joy, and then kind of made me, let's say, a bit less cynical about the possibility of social change. But it was a really, really long process. And hopefully maybe for others that come to this reading group, and because now I am aware of that as a coordinator, and I try to, let's see if there is like uneasiness in a group, and I'm the one that says, yeah, I think this text was not that good, what do you think? And I'm the one who says this uncomfortable truth that maybe all of us are thinking, that I am the one who facilitates the situation that people start to feel that they can express themselves, to feel joy, and to kind of see this reading seminar and this gaining of knowledge, forming of knowledge as something that it's positive, they look forward to, and that it's something that they want to keep doing. And again, I know this maybe sounds really, really basic, but for me to actually, have these aha moment, so to say, was a long process. So I hopefully with me being now the coordinator of this reading seminar for others, it may be a bit shorter process if I kind of help to speed up the situations and conditions to make them more welcoming than they were for me when I started trying to find joy in seeking knowledge.
Wonderful. Thank you, Klara. Ola, are you ready to go?
Yes, thank you. And sorry. Well, I was I think that I resonate, and was like very interesting what was said before, that about this like that there may not be a language or vocabulary for like expressing the alternative possibilities, like utopia and future, like constructions of futures. And I think that like CAM School is very also, I mean, our like educational project, which is totally informal and experimental, it is very inspired also. I mean, it's somehow like we like thinking about this this project, which I mean this school, which like which theme actually last year was world making, that was very inspired by like by a text by Cruising Utopia, where like, I don't know if you're familiar with Jose Esteban Munoz, where like this idea that like the language and like a traditional thinking about utopia is like it's like often seeks like some established and fixed and idealized vision of the future, and like by the contrast, like Cruising Utopia like offer more like it's more like a fluid and open-ended concept, which like it's maybe not more focused to the future, but exploring the possibilities of the present moment, like rather than like a projecting vision for future. And I think that this is very somehow like inspiring for us when we create this situation, this educational situation, that we are very focused on not to like really predict what happened in the process of being together. And this is like 8 weeks of working together and exploring all formats. We work a lot with like a choreography, but we also like but also with sound, with like research, we are testing different like media, but we are very focused around performance and like and choreography. And like in this like meeting during this time, we are very like we are really like focus on this thinking about like potential of world building. We are also like very focused on the temporary moments, like how to like avoid like project some visions or like produce together some things, but more like active create the process of imagining and exploring and experimenting together. I am talking about, I don't have, of course, like answer about language of utopian language, and how I think that it is totally true that we can't, that is very difficult to think about like possible solutions and reparations modes, or like future like other scenarios using the same language or the same modes of like meetings and learning. I really like this, like all these like ideas to just switch the diets, or like go to work with some like or just change something on this daily basic like situation. I think that they are very like formative actually for like also for some like a future speculations, possible future speculations. So yeah, I think that this is just very, very like loose sharing of thoughts right now from my side. So thanks.
Thank you. Una?
Yeah, I was just thinking of what Klara actually said about this reading group and feminist reading group, and I was thinking about how, and I know that I shouldn't say this, and luckily none of my students is here, but it seemed to me that longer I'm teaching at the university, the more I'm aware that the actual content of our teaching doesn't really matter. I know it's a terrible thing to say, but it's true. And actually that the content of our teaching, you know, that whatever we are reading, you know, whatever text, are really just excuses for, you know, establishing connections, like learning how to think, learning how to disagree, you know, learning how to agree, you know, learning how to experience, you know, fascination by somebody's writing, or, you know, opening ourselves up to certain, and actually I think any kind of content would do, you know, like especially at the Arts Academy. I think really like we are, and in some ways obviously this is also a utopia. Like I can't really come and say, well, you know, we're not going to be learning about art anymore, we're just going to be reading whatever journal, you know, like daily papers, and discuss that for the rest of our education, because I don't really, you know, in some ways I don't really care. And it's not true, you know, it's not entirely true. Obviously I care about certain ideas, and you know, it's not that it's entirely unimportant, but I think that some of this and I was really like, Klara, when you were describing how you used to be cynical, and you know how to kind of, and also how to approach that kind of, you know, super sophisticated discursive level of, you know, very serious intellectual debate and so and I mean, yes, I think we all went through that. I think that's like you know, something that, and I do hope that, you know, future generations won't have to actually go through that, like that they will actually have a shortcut into saying, well, you know what, this is like just paper stuff and I'm not really engaged in that, and it doesn't really matter what the content of our engagement is, as long as, you know, we are kind of making a network of connections amongst and, you know, between us. So I guess that's my statement on pedagogy of joy, you know, how to kind of be more focused on the connections that we're making between us and not so much on the content of our discussions or debates or whatever. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. So yeah, we already took up quite some time. So I think now is a good moment to maybe open the floor for the audience in case anybody wants to ask any questions. Feel free to raise your hand. Okay. In case there are no questions, I think that we might just wrap it up wrap it up right now. So just a few finishing thoughts. So as I already mentioned, all of the speakers tonight, including myself, we are all members of various research teams that have just started with their quest for reparative practices. And we will have more public events and more activities. And in case you wish to stay tuned, you can of course follow the partner social media. And I would just like to announce the remaining events of the series. So this is the series Reparative Explorations, the online conversations. This was an opening event, and it will be followed by the discussions hosted by this evening was hosted by my organization's Kurziv or Kulturpunkt. And the following sessions will also take part on Tuesdays quite soon, and we will have one session hosted by Krytyka Polityczna, which will be dealing with more than human reparative practices. And the finishing session by Maska that will be tackling reparative potentials of feminist artistic research strategies. So yes, I invite you to also follow the following the next online events, and we are I think all quite excited to see where this research will take us during the following 2 years. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And